Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I'm your host, Michael Voss. Dragon and Sudden here. I'm happy to be here with you. It is February 2nd, a Thursday. It's about 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm speaking with you because I couldn't go to sleep. After dealing with the shocking situation of leftist protesters being arrested in Binghamton, New York, I was up reading the news, and then I decided to look at what's happening internationally. And you may be surprised about what's happening here because it looks like someone is trying to help Iran. It seems like some of the news media is trying to help Joe Biden with his policies with Iran. I know it sounds a little odd and it looks confusing, but I'm going to try and explain what I mean. But first, I do want to mention, if this is the first time that you're seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out to hear whatever you have to say from across the world because we want to hear your voice. We believe in the First Amendment. We believe you have an opinion about things that are affecting your life, and you should be able to speak. Now, to get to, and I hope you'll see us this Sunday, and I do want to mention that we are currently using our backup system as our main computers are down, and we're putting the funding together to get that up, and it'll bring us back to the higher quality you may expect. But let me delve into what's going on with Iran right now, with the United States, France, the rest of the world. As those who have been following us, especially over the last 2 years, we have emphasized the fact that the Biden and Harris administration has zero foreign policy, and it's having a negative impact in the world. The weakness of the Biden-Harris administration in terms of leadership has been having a rippling effect that has affected various regions across the nation and is leading us closer, we believe, to 3 regional wars. That would be in Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. And we have seen that the Biden-Harris administration, as we have covered across the last 2 years, has drawn together Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. And this has been increasing the instability in the world. It has been reducing the amount of peace in the world. It is a negative consequence. And we're seeing even more of that even so far in 2023. And it seems like some of the American news media is trying to cover for the Biden-Harris administration to make you, my fellow Americans, believe that's not happening. And it's kind of sad because the rest of the world, they see something very different. Now, I want to let's go through this so you can see this for yourself. You may have not known this, but late last night, we saw that there was breaking news around the world about what's been happening with Iran. And as you can see from a Google search, that several news agencies have credited the United States with seizing weapons, thousands of weapons being shipped by Iran to Yemen. And this is a problem. But at the same time, we see many other news agencies around the world trying to give credit to France. And some of them are taking a middle ground, a neutral ground of saying, well, it's the United States and France working together that stopped this shipment of firearms from Iran to to Yemen. And so the question is, what's the real truth? And then would be the question, why has the truth been, it seems, manufactured or altered somewhat? Now, Barron's is a respected name around the world. They are a credible news agency. I don't think anyone doubts their news. And their reporting, which coincides with agency France Press and also the Wall Street Journal, has cited and stated that Western allies seize arms shipments bound for Yemen's rebels. It seems that the United States announced yesterday that on January 15th, the United States government, in part, and more importantly, the French Special Forces captured a shipment of arms, some 3,000 assault rifles, 578,000 rounds of ammunition, and 23 anti-tank guided missiles were taken from an Iran shipping boat and was recovered. This was going to the Houthi rebels in Yemen who have been fighting an ongoing war. This has been happening since 2015 during the Obama and Biden administration, where the Obama and Biden administration had been trying to supply Saudi Arabia with weapons and support as they fought the rebels, the Houthis, which are backed by Iran. It gets complicated. I'm trying to make it simple for you. And that didn't go well because Obama was weak and his international policy was weak. And with that weakness came some support for the Saudis, but not a serious support. And therefore, the civil war continued and continued into the international crisis it is now. It is considered one of the biggest humanitarian crises on the earth at this time. That's troubling. What is the Biden administration doing? Well, we've seen that since the Biden administration went out and abandoned Americans, 5,000 Americans in Afghanistan, and then 10,000 Americans in the Ukraine, well, that led to Russia invading the Ukraine. That led to China declaring they were going to take over Taiwan by force. It led to over 75 missiles, many hypersonic missiles, being with Chinese technology being fired by North Korea, the puppet of China, threatening South Korea and Japan. It led to Japan losing its confidence and faith in the United States, and therefore now building up its own offensive military, and it leads to South Korea saying that they must get nuclear weapons or they will make their own. It led to Germany saying that they would not deploy or allow to be deployed any of their Leopard 2 tanks unless the United States first put in the M1 Abrams tanks in the Ukraine, which the Biden administration did. In each of these cases, all of the allies of the United States have a visible and visceral disdain and distrust of the Biden-Harris administration in the United States under their guidance. If that were not the case, many of these rogue nations, many of these actions by our allies would never occur. They've never occurred under a strong president, and now with a weak president with no foreign policy in place, we are seeing these ripples happen. In terms of Iran, as we have covered since 2021, February of 2021, the Biden administration has been desperate to get the Iran nuclear deal done. And over again, they have been giving concessions to sanctions, removing some sanctions, and trying to give Iran every opportunity to enter into the Iran nuclear deal. On Iran's part, they have taken every opportunity to get more from the deal without saying yes. With various complications happening throughout the last 2 years, that would make most people think the Iran nuclear deal is dead. And yet, the Biden administration really hasn't said it's dead. We've heard comments from Joe Biden over the last 2 years at multiple times saying the deal's dead, and yet we've also seen the State Department go in under Antony Blinken and his deputies and continue to negotiate and to continue to give concessions to Iran. Let me tie that back. How does that affect what's happening with Yemen? So Barron's is saying that French special forces, with some help from the United States, seized a large number of weapons that were headed to the Yemen Houthis, a rebel force. Well, that's interesting because at the very same time, we are seeing that CNN has come out and said that U.S. and French forces seized Iranian-supplied weapons and ammunition bound for Yemen. They reported that February 1st. That's not true. That's not real. That's not what the rest of the world is reporting. Yes, the Pentagon announced this and France did not, but just because the Pentagon announced it, just because it seems, depending on the source, that the United States was helping France, doesn't mean that the United States did this. And if you read through the article from CNN, they're trying to make you believe that the United States was the leading factor, that they were the cause of this happening. That's not true. Now, why would they do that? Why would we see that CNN would try and prop up the Biden-Harris administration, whereas Barron's is telling us an entirely different story? And the rest of the world is somewhere in the middle in this news, that they're saying, well, the U.S. was involved, but France was the major player. Why would CNN give us a different story? Because CNN has a purpose. CNN has been looking to prop up the Biden-Harris administration. They have been critical in trying to downplay any negatives and to emphasize all the positives. It's something we've seen through most American news media, which is why most of the international news either doesn't really exist or has been pushed to the sidelines, if not in some ways altered, to make the Biden administration seem stronger for many of the Democrats that watch CNN, MSNBC, ABC News, most of the mainstream major media. So this is the problem here. They're trying to make Americans believe that America's doing a good job around the world and that the Biden-Harris administration is being seen as strong and that there is an effectiveness coming from the Biden-Harris international policy, that our foreign policy has some positive impact on the world. But yet, that's not true. That's not what many news agencies in the United States know and what the rest of the world is highly aware of. Again, if it was effective, we wouldn't be seeing China threaten Taiwan and declare they are absolutely going to go in by force and take it over. We wouldn't see Japan building its own army in contradiction to the 1960s U.S.-Japan treaty where the United States promised to provide a military for Japan. Nor would we see South Korea abandoning, basically going on their own instead of relying on the United States for its protection from North Korea. Nor would we see Iran and North Korea providing weapons and arms to Russia to fight against the Ukraine. There are so many of these assets that are telling us directly that the Biden-Harris administration isn't trusted in the world, that it is seen as weak, and that our American news media is doing everything it can with the forces that it has available to try and convince Americans, in particular Democrats, that things are going well, that everything's okay, that the Biden-Harris administration have a firm hand on everything. But that's just not the case. It's not the reality that we see. And the question is, well, why would they try and do that? Well, because, at least as it's being reported now by the National Review and the Free Beacon, the Biden administration is still trying to make a deal with Iran. Even though they have denounced the fact that Iran is killing its own women for showing their hair, that they are killing protesters who are upset that Iran killed women for showing their hair. Even though they're upset with Iran for shipping out weapons and increasing the global instability, and that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard are continuing to be the leaders of global terror, even as all this is happening, the Biden administration is still trying to preserve the Obama administration and put themselves as well in the history books for the Iran nuclear deal. Something that very few nations actually believe is going to stop Iran from creating nuclear weapons. And of course, Israel is absolutely adamant it will not. in addition to the fact that Iran is continuing to build ballistic missiles that are threatening not just Israel, but Europe and the United States. Thus, just in the last week, Israel stepped forward reportedly and blew up a ballistic missiles facility that was illegal on international terms. It was an illegal site that they had no right to be building because Joe Biden will not do it. Because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do not have the strength of will to actually take firm action and support our allies and defend the United States from the near-term and long-term enemies of our nation. In this article by National Review, and again, all of the links of all the videos we're speaking about will be in the description so you can see this for yourself and come to your own conclusion. But in the article by National Review, they state, while President Biden called the deal dead in off-the-cuff comments caught on video during a campaign rally last fall, administration officials have refused to declare it dead, only going so far as to say it's not a focus right now. Tehran's intransience in negotiating table at the intransience at the negotiating table throughout 2021, Iran's efforts to supply the Russian military with drones and other weapons of war, and the crackdown on ongoing protests throughout the country have put the nuclear negotiations on the back burner, according to the Biden administration. That doesn't mean they can't be brought back. In fact, there are some indications that U.S. outreach has continued amid the Iranian demonstrations. So we have evidence, it is being reported by credible news sources, that the Biden administration, as it has done previously from 2021 until this moment in 2023, they have continued to have back-channel conversations and deal-making no matter what Iran does. That's terrifying to me. It is terrifying that we see some news agencies trying to prop up the Biden-Harris administration even as they know that this is not something that's true, that they are weak, and that the actions they are attributing to the Biden-Harris administration are actually the actions of other nations absolutely independent of the Biden-Harris administration. It's much like the way the American news media reported Japan's actions to build a military as if it were something that Biden encouraged and knew about when Japan did it on its own. Why is this such a big deal to us and to our audience that have been following this for the last 2 years, as we've reported on this and the major mainstream media has tried to ignore it? Because it means that things are getting worse, that the Biden administration isn't being regarded with any strength, and therefore their actions are being thrown to the wayside. No one has any belief that America, the police of the world, whether we like it or not, is actually going to do anything. And because they don't believe we're going to do anything, there is nothing to stop them from taking extreme actions, as we have seen in Ukraine, as we are seeing with threats against Taiwan, threats against South Korea and Japan, and now in the Middle East with Iran, especially in Yemen. And we don't believe that's the end of it. We again say Americans need to pay attention, and the news media needs to be honest, to report the information that is critical to our nation. Because even though it is internationally happening, that directly affects the safety of Americans, either because of our open border and terrorists coming across that border, as has happened, and we have known about from the individuals we have caught, and God knows how many we have not, as well as seeing that Americans and businesses, American businesses around the world, are in danger from these same terrorists and negative implications, as well as our allies being in direct danger and growing danger because of the lack of American foresight. This is upsetting to us, that the Biden administration is so concerned about a political win. They are so desperate for a political win that they are willing to work with Iran, even as Iran is inciting and helping to increase the amount of violence in the world, like in Yemen, in helping to continue a fight in the Ukraine, as we are seeing all of these nations' tensions increase, and even the world nuclear clock has counted down now to 90 seconds under the Biden administration. It tells you right there, things are getting worse. We need honest reporting from our news media. We need Americans to pay attention and to realize that what's happening internationally is ultimately affecting America's safety as well. And we need the Biden-Harris administration to stop trying to play to votes in the next election, trying to maintain power in the future and deal with the safety of America now and in the future. And that is more important than winning an election. But perhaps you think that we've misunderstood. Perhaps you think that the coverage that we have provided today and over the last 2 years isn't taking into account all of the international factors. And if you think that, we'd like to know why. If you're watching this from overseas, we would like to hear your take on what's been happening over the last 2 years and this latest news that we have been talking about. Whatever you believe, we'd like to hear your voice, and we hope you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we talk about this and all the factors that are affecting your life. We thank you, and we thank you for your patience with our backup system. We hope to get it fixed as soon as we can get the money together. We're working on it as hard as we can, but we thank you, and we hope you'll be well.